On this Monday night, the man now tasked with taking down Justin Trudeau. Canada's Conservative Party gets a retooling with a new leader.
You're going to be seeing and hearing a lot from me.
The challenges Erin O'Toole now faces. The U.S. approves a COVID-19 treatment.
And we've been tracking this.
Why scientists have concerns as fresh questions are raised about how long immunity lasts. Fire and fury in Wisconsin. The latest case of a white police officer shooting a black man and scoring the ultimate goal. The triumphs and tribulations for a young Canadian soccer star.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with a huge come-from-behind win that ends an unprecedented race for the Conservative Party of Canada. Erin O'Toole won the party's top job in convincing fashion early this morning after a major technical glitch delayed results for hours.
My fellow Canadians, my name is Erin O'Toole. I believe in this country, and I'm running to serve you as Prime Minister.
It was a crushing defeat for Conservative Party co-founder Peter MacKay, who was considered the frontrunner. O'Toole defeated MacKay on the third ballot by a margin of 57% to 43%. O'Toole is promising to unite the party and vows the Conservatives will be ready to win the next federal election. But there's a lot of work to do. Our chief political correspondent David Akin has our top story tonight.
All right, next Prime Minister.
It was just after 1 a.m. Ottawa time when Ontario MP Erin O'Toole celebrated his moment of triumph.
To the millions of Canadians that are still up, that I'm meeting tonight for the first time, good morning. I'm Erin O'Toole.
The early morning finish was the result of some malfunctioning machines that helped process 175,000 ballots. That's an all-time record for any leadership race. Peter MacKay had been the presumptive favorite, but O'Toole ran an aggressive campaign from the right. That was an approach that won over social conservatives who helped power political newcomer Leslyn Lewis to a strong third-place finish. Lewis was just the second black woman to ever seek the leadership of a major Canadian federal party. And she's now seen as a rock star in the Conservative Party, who is being encouraged to run in the next general election. When she dropped off the ballot on Sunday, thousands of her supporters swung to O'Toole, and that put him over the top.
Today you have given me a clear mission to unite our party, to champion our conservative principles.
Now O'Toole must introduce himself to Canadian voters.
You're going to be seeing and hearing a lot from me in the coming weeks and months. But I want you to know from the start that I'm here to fight for you and your family.
O'Toole is 47. That's a year younger than Justin Trudeau. O'Toole spent 12 years in the Air Force as a navigator on Sea King helicopters. After the Air Force, O'Toole worked as a corporate lawyer before becoming an MP in 2012 for the riding of Durham, east of Toronto. He took his first run at the leadership in 2017, but lost to Andrew Scheer. Now, O'Toole believes he can do what Scheer could not, beat Trudeau.
The world still needs more Canada. It just needs less Justin Trudeau.
But O'Toole knows he must do more than just attack Trudeau, and he has promised to put forward a positive vision that he thinks is going to attract Liberal and NDP voters disillusioned with their own parties. Robin.
David Akin in Ottawa. Thanks, David. Reaction to O'Toole's win is pouring in, but not all of it is positive. The Liberals were quick to take aim at his list of priorities, including the environment.
I've also heard that the first thing that Erin O'Toole wants to do is eliminate the price on pollution. I don't think pollution should be free. I think that'd be a regressive move. I think Canadians recognize that paying for the pollution that comes out of our tailpipes and in other forms of pollution is just.
And the NDP raised concerns about potential cuts that could come with O'Toole at the helm.
This is someone who's been endorsed by Jason Kenney. And we've seen, certainly in Alberta, we've seen what that type of conservatism does. It's cuts to healthcare, it's cuts to childcare, cuts to education.
Let's bring in our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson, who spent hours watching this race last night. Mercedes, what is the first thing Erin O'Toole has to do now that he's the opposition leader?
Well, Robin, the first thing he has to do is get ready for an election, because one could happen as soon as this fall. On September 23rd, Justin Trudeau and his government will deliver the throne speech, and there could be a confidence vote that could bring down the government at any point after that. That means Erin O'Toole has to have his power players in position in his inner circle and an election platform ready to go. Even though we're not expecting the government to fall necessarily, he has to assume that it could and be prepared for that. He also needs to introduce himself to Canadians, because a lot of people don't know who Erin O'Toole is. And that was a big problem for Andrew Scheer, and a mistake the party can't afford to make again. He also has to work on getting party unity together. That should be fairly easy for him. He's pretty well liked, but he's got to get everybody under that big blue tent in his inner circle.
Okay, it's one thing to win the leadership, but now he has to win over Canadians. What kind of strategy will that involve?
So he has to move away from the right side of the spectrum that he's been on. He played himself as a true blue conservative in the leadership race to try to get lots of votes. But when he runs in the general election, he's got to be more centrist. He has to tell Canadians what he stands for, not what he doesn't stand for. And they have to have a solid pandemic response that will tell Canadians what they'll offer them, and especially has to be able to appeal to suburban women voters in the 905 in Quebec who could determine the next election.
The Liberals are obviously taking note of this. What will Justin Trudeau and his team do with the latest development in the Conservative leadership?
Well, they will exploit that hard right angle of the campaign that Erin O'Toole ran on. They'll try to characterize him as a social conservative, and they will try to say he's basically Andrew Scheer or Stephen Harper light and define him. So for the O'Toole people, the issue here is to make sure he's not defined by Justin Trudeau, but by Erin O'Toole.
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa, thanks for your insight. Last week, it was Joe Biden. This week is Donald Trump's turn in the spotlight. Republicans have kicked off their convention, solidifying Trump as the party's presidential nominee for a second time. Their four-day convention is aimed at firing up the base, but it may not do much to win over Americans who are on the fence about giving Trump another term. Jackson Prosco reports.
With his country in crisis and with Americans deeply unsatisfied, President Donald Trump defiantly accepted his party's nomination.
And the only way they can take this election away from us is if this is a rigged election.
Touting baseless conspiracies, Trump fired off a familiar list of mistruths and grievances.
Because we have to win. This is the most important election in the history of our country.
A preview of the convention and campaign to come.
What we're going to do is make a very clear picture of how America is a better place today than it was before President Trump's election.
Night one features the St. Louis couple who pointed their guns at Black Lives Matter protesters. Trump's son, Don Jr., will be the first of 6 Trump family members to speak this week. Their voices of grievance, unlikely to acknowledge the deep challenges gripping the U.S.
COVID is going to play into this, and there's just no way to deny it. That's like the elephant in the room. But ultimately, it is going to be personality, and it is going to be about leadership ability.
Which is why Republicans have decided they don't need a new platform, not when they've gone all in on Trump. The party voted to give blanket support to the president's agenda, believing that's all it will take to beat Joe Biden and the Democrats.
Well, we're going to take our case to the American people. It's a case of lower taxes, free market economics, secure borders, right to life.
It may be a tough sell. Shortly before Trump was confirmed as his party's candidate, 27 former Republican lawmakers announced their support for Joe Biden. And tonight, Trump faces another blow from within his own administration. His longtime advisor, Kellyanne Conway, has announced she's leaving the White House to focus on her family. Conway's husband is an outspoken Trump critic, and the couple's 15-year-old daughter has publicly announced she's seeking legal emancipation from her parents. Robin.
Jackson Prosco in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. Ahead of the convention's kickoff, President Trump put pressure on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to authorize the use of donated blood plasma to treat COVID-19 patients. Trump accused the agency of stalling its approval. But as Eric Sorensen reports, critics say the program is going forward before large-scale trials have even been completed.
John Keating had COVID-19. Now he's donating his blood plasma to help others who are infected. It's one of the most promising treatments for COVID-19, antibodies that can neutralize the virus. U.S. President Trump hailed the Food and Drug Administration and his own speed in authorizing it.
A more traditional administration where they would have taken years to come up with this stuff.
The approval came just a day after Trump suggested the FDA was conspiring to hold up the treatment, tweeting, "Obviously, they are hoping to delay the answer until after November 3rd, Election Day." The FDA commissioner defends the sudden authorization, saying early tests show a 35% improvement in survival.
Now, we're waiting for more data, but this clearly meets the criteria that we've established for emergency use authorization.
But some specialists worry whether science is being bent to the will of politics.
There is a lot of non-science influence that I'm seeing, whether it's press releases, whether it's political pressure. When you have a new treatment, you want to put it through rigorous scientific testing before you are using it on broad groups of people.
Convalescent plasma has been used for 100 years. It works like this. Patients who've recovered from COVID-19 have developed a lot of antibodies, proteins to fight the virus. Transfusing their blood plasma can help current COVID victims stave off the worst effects. But small trials haven't necessarily identified all adverse effects or whether immunity will actually hold. The World Health Organization says proper large-scale tests aren't finished, so results aren't conclusive.
The trials have been relatively small, and at the moment it's still very low-quality evidence.
If you've fully recovered from COVID-19, consider donating plasma.
But the U.S. FDA is now encouraging recovered COVID-19 patients to donate. And after his experience, John Keating is happy to do so.
We all just need to do what we can to get through this. And if this is my little part to do that, I'll do whatever I can.
The big question is fast-tracking antibody treatment at this point medically justified or politically reckless? Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Researchers in Hong Kong are reporting the first documented case of COVID-19 reinfection. A 33-year-old man was first diagnosed in late March. 4.5 months later, researchers say he contracted a different strain of the virus. The case raises questions about how long immunity may last. This is also significant for scientists who've been working on treatments and vaccines based on antibodies. Confronting a mass killer in court.
You killed your own humanity.
Coming up, families face the man behind the New Zealand massacre. Firefighters in California aren't getting much of a break from the flames raging across the state. More lightning was in the forecast, raising fears even more fires might break out. Thankfully, that didn't happen. Crews are working around the clock to gain some control over two of the biggest wildfires in California's history. Combined, they have burned through nearly 450,000 hectares of land, forcing at least 100,000 people from their homes. 7 people have died. A state of emergency has been declared in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where protests erupted last night after a police shooting of a black man. The governor has deployed 125 members of the National Guard, and a warning: some of the video you're about to see is disturbing. We stopped the video before it shows officers firing multiple shots into Jacob Blake's back. Police were called to a domestic dispute. Witnesses say Blake was trying to break up a fight between 2 women and that officers attempted to use a taser on him before following him to his vehicle and opening fire. The 29-year-old is in hospital in stable condition. His family's lawyer says Blake's 3 sons were inside the car when it happened. 2 officers involved in the shooting are on administrative leave pending an investigation. And today the city's mayor came face to face with outraged protesters.
Because these are under your payroll. Right. You pay them. Yeah. You are responsible for them. You're responsible for all of their actions. They need to be reprimanded for everything that they do. So this man needs to be arrested. It's on camera. There's already proof.
Police used tear gas to break up angry demonstrations overnight. Some protesters set vehicles on fire and smashed store windows. There are chilling new details from last year's deadly mosque attacks in New Zealand. During the start of his sentencing hearing, a court heard how Brenton Tarrant planned and methodically killed 51 people to lower New Zealand's immigration rates. The victims' families and survivors got their first chance to confront the Australian gunman. The 29-year-old showed little emotion while families talked about the horror they faced and the torment they still live with.
The trauma will live with me forever. The images, smell and sound of the mosque on that day haunt me.
You terrorized the whole New Zealand and saddened the whole world.
Tarrant pleaded guilty to 51 counts of murder, 40 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of terrorism. It's the first terrorism conviction in New Zealand's history. Still ahead, the bleak warnings from health experts as Canada's opioid crisis soars. New research on Canada's opioid crisis has found that most overdose deaths have been caused by a toxic supply of street drugs. BC alone has seen more than 700 people die since January. That's compared to just over 200 who have died in that province from COVID-19. Federal officials say the drug problem cannot be ignored, but across the country there is little consensus on what needs to be done in order to save lives. Heather Yerkes-West explains.
Joseph Vahama was just 25 when he took a fatal dose of fentanyl he purchased on the street.
He was a loving father of 2 little boys, so we have the trauma for them of losing their father. He was a well-respected, well-liked colleague.
New research published in the Canadian Medical Association Journal has found that the vast majority of overdose deaths are caused by a toxic street drug supply. Between 2015 and 2017, fewer than 2% of opioid deaths were linked to drugs that had been properly prescribed.
The street illicit drug supply is not safe right now and is increasingly more dangerous as we navigate these changes related to the COVID-19 measures that have been taken.
Opioid overdoses have increased significantly since the beginning of the pandemic. A lack of safer supply of opioids, a reduction or change of services, and increased isolation have all conspired to present an increased risk of death for people who use opioids.
The combined crises have had hospital ICUs in Edmonton at near capacity in recent weeks. But across the country, there is disagreement on how the crisis should best be handled. As BC pushes for decriminalization and safe supply, Alberta's premier has publicly challenged harm reduction models. Federal officials say Canada's drug problem cannot be ignored.
We know that you cannot arrest your way out of an opioid crisis. It is escalating as we speak. Some of the gains that were made prior to COVID-19 have unfortunately been lost.
Last week, the country's health minister announced a review of supervised consumption policies. But with so many deaths, Joseph Vahama's mother worries time is going to waste and that a safe supply is needed now in order to save lives. Heather Yerkes-West, Global News, Calgary.
Up next, the Canadian who made soccer history after taking Europe's top prize. Canadian soccer star Alphonso Davies is celebrating a dream come true. He helped Bayern Munich clean up and become the best team in Europe for a 6th time, winning the Champions League yesterday. Davies, who came to Canada as a young refugee, is only 19. And as Redmond Shannon reports, he's already attained a lifetime of achievements.
In soccer, arguably only the World Cup is bigger than the UEFA Champions League. And now, a Canadian international has his hands on the trophy, 19-year-old Alphonso Davies. Only one other Canadian man has won the Champions League, but Owen Hargreaves opted to play for England. Edmonton-raised Davies has been a central part of Bayern Munich's winning team. The pandemic meant this year's tournament ended 3 months late inside an empty stadium, but the noisy celebrations ran long into the Lisbon night.
Whoa! Jesse! Oh my God!
Crowned with an official recognition of Canadian sports stardom.
Drake! You followed me! Oh my God!
Yes, an Instagram follow from Drake.
My goal as a player to reach professional level.
Davies and his family moved to Canada as Liberian refugees when he was 5, and it wasn't long before his natural talent was turning the heads of coaches.
He still calls me coach to this day, even though I'm not his coach. He had a glow about him. He had obviously performance on the field, but you can tell that there was just something special, something that I haven't seen before from a kid that age.
At just 15, he was part of the Vancouver Whitecaps team in the MLS before becoming the most expensive trade in Major League history when he was snapped up by German giants Bayern Munich.
We watched the whole game. We had it on the big screen in our meal room and everyone was in there supporting him, and yeah, it was a good experience.
You bet it was. Davies' victory on Sunday earned the Whitecaps an extra $1.5 million in trade bonuses. And this week might get even better for Davies. His Canadian girlfriend, Jordan Huitema, could win the Women's Champions League with Paris. She plays in her semi-final on Wednesday. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
How can you not love this story? That is Global National for this Monday. I'm Robin Gill. We leave you tonight with a surprise at sea. Sean Russell was out fishing with his daughter on Sunday when a pair of humpback whales put on a show for them.
Now, what do you think of that?
What just happened?
Needless to say, there was a lot of excitement. Thank you for watching. Have a great night.